that after the burial, he went home and he shut the door and he wouldn't let any of his children in the house. So I started sending him flowers and love letters. And over 6 months' time, and I would go visit, and I'd sit outside the house and bring my flowers and put them on the porch. And this is after flying from Idaho or wherever I was, and I knew he was in there, and I'd leave them. And then I'd go on and visit my sister, and et cetera, et cetera. And finally, he opened the door, which was to me opening the door to himself. And so now we're in a totally different environment and different situation. I'm certain that without the practice, that is not how I would have responded to an experience, quote unquote, of rejection. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. If I'd have been operating out of that mindset of my youth, I would have said, forget you. And instead, I was able to understand what was happening to my father. I could see and feel his suffering, his tremendous heartbreak. I knew that he didn't have any training in dealing with emotion, none. And I knew that in my family, my mother was the emotional intelligence. And that when she passed away, he had no skills, no capacity to handle the huge ocean of grief he found himself in. So my practice was to communicate to him that I was there for him, that I supported him, and that I loved him. But my practice also was to hold compassion for him and myself and my family so that we could all go through our grieving process peacefully and at our own pace.
When I interviewed Ty yesterday, I said to him that I've noticed that he's doing retreats for different kinds of groups of people, law enforcement officers, members of Congress, people of color. On the surface, I don't know, I wasn't quite sure what that was about. And then when I asked him, is your teaching different? And he said, what I'm trying to do, what I have to do every time is understand the particular suffering of these people who've lived with a certain kind of identity. And I'd like to ask you, as an African-American man, do you feel that this Vietnamese Buddhist monk can speak to your suffering or your identity? How do you experience the coming together of his culture and yours?
From a distance, many years ago, I heard Martin Luther King mention that a monk had asked him to come out against the Vietnam War, and that he was nominating this monk for the Nobel Prize. And I had heard that before. My wife introduced me to Thich Nhat Hanh. It was only during the middle of the retreat that the dots got connected for me.
No, in the early 90s?
In the
that
early
you realized
90s,
that was the monk?
That was the monk.
Wow.
And unequivocally, yes. Thai's deep practice emerged in the midst of tremendous suffering of the war. And that's a part, to me, of his authenticity, is if as he's able to be peaceful and graceful and kind, and I know some of the things he experienced in the war, because I also had family members in the war, for him to be able to be that peaceful and that open-hearted and that kind in the midst of the suffering he experienced without denying the suffering, I think that's a perfect model pathway through the African-American experience into the full human experience.
A cynic would say, well, he can give these beautiful teachings about ending violence, and then there are these individuals who come to a retreat like this who are clearly taking this seriously and taking this back to their lives, but they're just drops in the ocean.
That is true. I am a drop in the ocean, but I'm also the ocean. I'm a drop in America, but I'm also America. Every pain, every confusion, every good and every bad and every ugly of America is in me. And as I'm able to transform myself and heal myself and take care of myself, I'm very conscious that I'm healing and transforming and taking care of America. Particularly, I'm saying this for American cynics. But this is also true globally. And so as we're able, however small, however slowly, it's for real.
Larry Ward co-directs the Lotus Institute, devoted to the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh in Encinitas, California. He's co-authored a book with his wife, Love's Garden, A Guide to Mindful Relationships. The Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh makes his home in Plum Village in France. His books include The Miracle of Mindfulness and, more recently, The Art of Communicating. I also love his book, The Long Road Turns to Joy, A Guide to Walking Meditation. On our website, onbeing.org, you'll find a poem by Tess Gallagher on her mindfulness training with Thich Nhat Hanh. There's so much more there for delving and enjoying an entire Dharma talk, as well as links to Thich Nhat Hanh's current Nourishing Great Togetherness tour. Also, more on the calligraphy and meditation exhibit he's opened with the Blue Cliff Monastery in New York. That exhibit runs through the end of the year and is free and open to the public. We are on Facebook.com/onbeing. On Twitter, you can follow our show @BeingTweets. The best way to follow everything we do is through our weekly email newsletter. Click on the newsletter link on any page at onbeing.org. On Being is produced on-air and online by Chris Hegel, Lily Percy, and Stephanie Bell. Trent Gillis is our senior editor. Special thanks this week to Grey Wolf Press.
On Being is a Krista Tippett public production, distributed by American Public Media, and is supported by the Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide at fordfoundation.org. On Being is extending its reach throughout America with support from Lilly Endowment, an Indianapolis-based private foundation.
Next time, Amy Ray and Emily Saliers, the Indigo Girls, on God and music in church and smoky bars, and on music as a continuum of human existence.
There's not many things in life you can point to and go, that's metaphysical, but music is. But people write music, and what you get out of music comes from the people, and it comes from everything that's happened before it, and I love that. I love that there's a continuum always and forevermore. And so that's how we can really sponge up the entirety of human existence, is through music. There's just these moments, and it's not the personality of the musicians anymore. Something's disappeared, and there's no separation between performer and audience. That is what spirituality is supposed to be, no separation. It's sweaty, and it's not beautiful. It's transcendent, though.
That's the next On Being. Please join us.
Classical music can lift our spirits, express our joy, or maybe even help us get through difficult times. It speaks to us from across the centuries and brings us together in a shared human experience that bridges the cultural divide. Let's take that journey together. I'm Brad Cresswell. Join me for Afternoon Classics, weekdays from 1 to 4 p.m. here on Public Radio FM 91.
For me, it kind of felt like I was swimming through molasses at that point. It was hard to do things, but not achieving wasn't an option for me. I had to achieve. I had to go on. I couldn't quit. This teenage musician has overcome quite a lot and has become a superb young composer. Meet him with me, Christopher O'Reilly, on this week's From the Top. Sunday at noon on WGTE in Toledo.
This week in This American Life, a police officer, Adrian Schoolcraft, decides that he's going to wear a secret tape recorder on the job. He records roll calls where cops are told that their boss wanted more tickets issued, that they'd be disciplined.
He wants at least 3 seatbelts, 1 cell phone.
Adrian Schoolcraft also records police being told not to file reports on the worst crimes to help their numbers. But then, the police go after Adrian Schoolcraft. That's Sunday at 4 on Public Radio WGTE in Toledo.
NPR News and classical music from Public Radio FM 91, WGTE FM Toledo, WGLE Lima, WGDE Defiance, and WGBE in Bryant.